Welcome to the Rex Andrews Show. Glad to have you with us today. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. Glad you found us. Please take the time to give us a star rating. And I'm not afraid to beg. I will shamelessly beg. So if you like the show, give us a 5. And we're glad to have you with us. And please comment. For those who are listening, return listeners, thank you very much, because we're one of the fastest growing podcasts in the marketplace out there. There are over 1 million podcasts in the iTunes store, and we're in the top 10 fastest growing. So thank you to our listeners. And also thanks to our great guests. We always have great stories. Okay, a little bit of house cleaning, just like the normal stuff. If you don't like the platform you're listening on, you got all kinds of choices that were distributed on 23 different podcast systems worldwide, from the biggest down to the smallest. Find the one you love and follow us along and subscribe. Don't forget to stop by the show website at rexandrewshow.com. You can see bios for all of our guests. So those who've previously appeared, our current guests today, and then those who are coming up. We've always got a slate of great stories and great interviews. Don't forget also, too, to make sure that you visit our guests' profile websites and stuff. There's a lot of interesting things about our guests that we just don't have time to get to in the conversations. All right. So we'll always tell people I've got more interests than I have for just one lifetime, and around every corner is another discovery. So today we have one of those with us. And so I'd like to introduce this really interesting young lady. She's doing some great things. She's a designer, spent quite a bit of time designing, and she designs clothing. So that's interesting. An avid reader, she says. And so that's almost an attribute that isn't in existence anymore. Not that many people read. We've gotten to a point where we mostly listen. But the most important thing for you to know today, and what we're going to talk about, is she's up to some really interesting stuff, is she is the CEO and founder of a company called Titova. And I'm excited to welcome to the show today, Masha Titova. Masha, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Fantastic. Good to have you out there today. So how are things on the East Coast? Are it starting to warm up? You know, we're recording this on the 30th of March. So things starting to get warm out there in the Boston area?
It has been incredibly beautiful. I like
Nice.
the best March I've ever seen on the East Coast, for sure.
Yeah, it's nice. One thing people don't realize, I'm outside of Boulder. One thing that we have is our snowiest month is March. And so we get more snow then. But it's nice because it's already warming up and the ground is warm. So, 50 degrees the next day and the snow's gone. Or we've had 70s this week and then snow. So it's a little bit of helter-skelter. Okay. So for those who might be following along with us today, a lot of people will be listening to the show and then multitasking. They might be from a computer or multitasking on a phone or a mobile device. Masha, if you could real quick so they can follow along, can you give us a website that people can find you and your work? And then we'll start our story today.
Yeah, definitely. It is titoflabel.com. Titof is spelled Titov, and Titof Label across the board, all social platforms.
Okay, that's really straightforward. Okay, perfect. All right, so Masha, what we'd like to do on the program, I know you've listened to a couple of the episodes, and so it's nothing new here, but we share that for anybody who's new, is we always like to learn the backstory. I guess that's the proper phrase is these days, the popular way to do it. We want to know the story behind the successful people. And so I like to go back into people's histories to know, where were they born? Where were they raised? What was your family life like? Siblings, if you had any siblings that survived you, your education, what your parents did for a living. And so those things always contribute to who we are in addition to our professional experiences. So if you could humor me today, why don't we go back to the beginning? Where were you born?
I was born in Boston, Mass. As a firstborn of immigrant parents. My brothers were actually immigrated too, so I was the first out of everyone to be born here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I grew up in Massachusetts, but I actually ended up moving to Moscow in like middle school, part of high school years.
Okay.
So spent a number of years in Russia.
Okay.
Which has definitely affected me, and then moved back.
Okay, so let me ask you a quick question there then. So your last name, I was assuming, I didn't ask you off air, it is Russian then, right?
Yes, it is, yeah.
Okay. Now, and then you're the first generation American, right? Because your parents are immigrants.
Yep.
When did they originally come to the United States?
1990.
1990. Okay.
Hmm.
Was that for economic asylum, what they call it today, or was it political asylum? What brought your
No,
family to the States?
it was like a family issue that had happened, and basically they needed to find a new place, basically.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So, you were born here, but you said your brothers immigrated also when you came over?
Hmm. Yeah, so
Okay.
they're like 12 and 14 years older than me.
Okay. Okay. So it's
Yeah.
almost like second family then, almost.
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. So you went back to Russia for a few years. Now,
Yeah.
did you go to like elementary type school, junior high, high school there?
It
What
was
was?
middle school and freshman year of high school.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
do you speak Russian, or did you speak Russian when you went back?
So I understood Russian when I moved there, but very limited in actually being able to answer back or read or anything. So schooling was really, really tough. So I was there for 3 years, and kind of by the end of the third year, I was like starting to figure it out. And then I got brought right back. So
Brought back to the United States.
it was a lot. Yeah. It was like the most awkward, just awful, awkward teenage, like figuring out who you are in Russia was a very interesting situation.
So your time in Russia, you really probably remember. That's pretty formative years of
Oh yeah.
development.
Yeah.
Okay. What was the biggest contrast between as a young teenager in, well, okay, so you were there through freshman year of high school and then coming back to the States. What's the biggest contrast you remember?
Oh my gosh, everything. I mean,
Everything.
everything was different. But and also not only culturally was it different, but I was going from suburban Massachusetts to a major global metropolitan city. So, I mean, it would be almost the equivalent if I moved from suburban Massachusetts to New York City. It's just everything is so different.
Okay.
So just how it was, where I always was like, oh, I'm gonna be like going on like taking a yellow bus to school. Like I always had that like stereotypical American upbringing in my head, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh no, I'm like taking a subway and doing this, and it's just like the way of living was different. But then obviously mentally and just how people are in Russia compared to in the US is very, very different too. But yeah, so it's like there's no comparison basically.
Okay, so not to go too far here, but I'll bring us back to I'll bring us back on drive here. What's the biggest difference between the people in Russia in the culture compared to here in the United States?
No one smiles.
Nobody smiles.
it's just it's just there's an attitude there that is very different to the US, and I feel like there's always that stereotype of like Americans abroad is always like loud and obnoxious, where in Russia everything's kind of a little bit toned down and gloomy in a sort. So it was just, yeah, it wasn't my cup of tea. I was ready
Okay,
to come back.
ready to come back. So did you finish high school in the States then?
I did finish high school in the States. Yep.
Okay. Now you have the brothers that are older. Anybody else your age as far as siblings, or is that
Nope.
it?
That's it.
Okay. Okay. What types of things did you do with your spare time as a teenager? You get back to the States. What interests did you have? Were you
Yeah.
sports, or what did you do?
So since I was like a kid, I would always be drawing. So even in Russia, kind of the first thing that like my mom figured out was where can she go get drawing classes just to keep that like stability throughout. And then when I came back to the States, it was the same thing. I was taking like AP arts in high school, and I kind of knew I wanted to go on the art design track.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was a lot of my time. I did do sports, but it was kind of just that's the thing you did.
Sure.
Not particularly anything that great. But yeah, I would say for the most part, I was learning how to sew. I would figure out clothing construction. I was just always, always, always drawing and doing something like with my hands and artistic.
Okay. Now, what type of work do your parents do? I want to understand the influence of them on your life as far as.
So when they had moved to the US, they were immigrants. So
Mhm.
basically, my dad has his own company, kind of following that American dream. And my mom also had started her own company. Um, but at this point now, they're both retired.
Okay.
So I would definitely say kind of seeing
Entrepreneurs.
them. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Uh, Entrepreneur people are different than people who've W-2'd all their life, because they're usually understand the value of a dollar a little more, and
Oh,
also
yeah.
understand how to take risks and work hard. And it's really interesting. I wanted to share this with you. I have had a very large number of interviewees on the show who have been first or second generation immigrants.
Mhm.
And I just find it's an interesting underlying currency or current in the show, is the fact that there's a lot of people who came here and actually built out and took advantage of that American dream, and brought their families here and raised their kids here. So it's hats off to your family. You're in the same vein of so many successful people that we've had on the show. Okay.
Yeah, and I have to say, I mean, I was born here, so I kind of didn't know any different,
Right.
but as kind of not the ideal situation of moving to Russia was, now looking back at it, I like being back and being able to live in the States. I do have a much different perspective and a much better appreciation of my situation, and being able to be in the United States is just like, I feel very lucky, and kind of, I don't, if I hadn't moved to Russia, I don't think that I would have this like appreciation I do today.
Yeah. I always tell people, go, if you are frustrated with the United States, travel abroad extensively or live abroad, because you'll come back thinking this is wonderful compared to the places you've been.
And for various reasons.
Yeah, it can be different in each country. Okay, so you wrapped up high school there in the Boston area, and then what was next? Did you go on to school for design? Did you work? I mean, what were your next steps?
Yeah, I ended up going to Mass Art in Boston.
Okay,
So I went full kind of track into fashion design. I had always, for as long as I can remember, I knew that that was the industry that I really wanted to be in. Going into school, it was a hard decision to choose which school, because I really wanted to do like a business and a fashion, so kind of having both, like a double major type situation, because I always knew I wanted to specifically have not just work in fashion, but have a company within the fashion industry.
okay,
um, and that basically like doesn't exist. If you go to an art school, they're very anti-business. They're all about creativity and pushing boundaries and kind of really getting the art out there. And then I felt any business school I was looking at, it just felt very gray and bland,
sure.
and didn't take like an artistic industry as seriously. So I had to choose, and I chose to go kind of into the fashion design world first, and kind of focus there. And I cross-registered and basically just online or went to lectures and tried to figure out the business side on my own, essentially.
Okay. So how long did you go to school for the fashion design?
It like a typical 4 year.
4 year. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. See, that's a whole world that's foreign to me. My background is computers and software, and so I've always had a jaded view of that, because we would go here every year to the Javits Center
Mm-hmm.
and have these computer conferences, and it always seemed weird because we always seemed to be there at a time when we split the Javits Center with some sort of trade show for the fashion industry.
Yeah, probably coutier.
Yeah, and so it'd be really funny because you'd go to Javits, and on one end there'd be all these computer geeks, and it's mostly guys in suits, and then you'd go down further to walk the other end, and there's
Like everything's
oh,
pink.
everything's pink and beautiful
Floral
women, and
and
all this
yeah.
stuff, and really, and hardly any men anywhere, and it was just hilarious. And so
Polar opposites.
yeah, complete polar opposites and stuff. And so I and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way to anybody's that interesting. And it was just like, well, that's all frou-frou. I mean, that's neat, but you know, I'm helping companies build businesses with software. I'm helping Citibank manage assets worldwide, and someone over there is designing a new blouse. I mean, you know, I just didn't track with that. I just didn't track with that at all. So, anyway, okay, so the 4 years you get through all that, you're really focused on the design side of the business. You finish up school. Then what was your next hop?
So I basically graduated, and my one and only goal was to get a job. I knew I wanted to have a company, but every mentor and everyone I listened to, the number one recommendation was to go learn on someone else's penny.
Sure.
And really understand, and go work for a company you hate working at, and go work for a company you love working at, and understand why for both reasons, and try to understand if a company is not doing well, why. Like, don't repeat their mistakes, and vice versa. If they're doing like really, really well, what is it that is making them successful?
Mm-hmm.
So my goal was to get any job, just to have something. I didn't really care what, like if it was in sportswear or an evening wear or shoes or bags, or it really didn't matter. I just wanted to be somewhere. And I ended up getting a job in Los Angeles working for BCBG Max Azria.
Okay.
Basically within a couple weeks of graduation. So I graduated, moved straight to LA, and worked there as a product developer, and really kind of got to see what a corporate structure of a company was like. They were massive. Just on the design team, there must have been 40, 50 people.
Wow.
Between every category. Because then within every category, I was on evening wear, and there'd be 5 of us. Then you'd go into knitwear, there'd be another 5 people. Accessories had 7 people. So every single kind of apparel category had their own teams. So It was really interesting to see kind of what a company that's probably 20 something years old at this point looks like, that's established, and see how it was working there. That was not my favorite place to work. And essentially after a few months, I started to look for a new job. And it actually was to the point that I didn't even know that I wanted to actually continue working in fashion. Like, that's how much I did not enjoy that experience. I started taking online courses for computer programming and like just completely left field.
You should have just stopped right there and come on down the Javits Center and just gone over to that other side, gone onto the dark side.
But I was making absolute minimum wage. I was barely making rent. I was in a city that wasn't like the city I wanted to be in. No. I had always wanted to be in New York, not necessarily in Los Angeles. I didn't know a lot of people. It was basically all my friends were from this one company. And I just was constantly interviewing, trying to figure out any new place to go. And I was already making bare minimum, so I literally could go anywhere and it would probably be better. And I had interviewed all over the place, hadn't heard anything back. And on a whim, on my year anniversary, I quit. And I was like, I don't know. The world will figure it out, but I'm not, for my own like mental health, I'm not coming back.
Right.
And I decided, I can go dog walk and work at Trader Joe's and make the same amount of money and maybe be a little bit happier and just absolutely anything else. So I decided to quit. And 2 days after I quit, I got a job offer to start immediately.
That's pretty doggone lucky.
So quite literally within like 5 days of my last day, I ended up starting my new job, which was Yeezy, which is Kanye's brand. And I was doing majority product development and production, but because the team was small, on any given day, I could have been doing absolutely anything. So I went from really corporate to like, you have this one task and this is the only task, and like stay in your lane, to essentially a startup culture. So just polar opposites. And I really quickly realized that I really love startup culture and being able to partake in various kind of areas. And I just felt really comfortable in that kind of environment. I ended up working there for almost 3 years, and I basically just got to a point where I was like, I can't be in LA anymore. I don't want to be here. We're done. So I moved to, well, I was gonna do the same thing where I was like, it worked once, so like maybe I'll
Sure.
just like quit and move to New York, and then like when I arrive that like next day I'll get a job. And my all while this is happening, I'm starting to think about my company and what I want to do in the market, and I'm making samples and kind of it's all back burner on the side, but I kind of gave wind to my family like, oh, I'm moving to New York, like I'm done. Like we're moving back East Coast, and everyone in my family essentially was like, no, that's not what you're going to do. You're going to move back home and you're going to start this thing because you've been talking about it for so long. You're not married, you don't have kids, you don't have a mortgage. If you're going to do it, you're going to do it now. If you move to New York, you're never going to start it because you're going to have
Sure.
a life, you're going to have a job, you're going to be working overtime. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it took a couple of weeks, maybe a couple months, and they basically convinced me that this would be a good idea to move back home to the suburbs and start TTOF. And that's essentially where I have ended.
Wow. What a journey.
Yeah.
So from Boston to Moscow to Boston to LA back to Boston.
Yeah.
Well, and one thing a lot of people don't know if they haven't done a lot of travel is Los Angeles is not a marketplace, a city that's like New York or Boston. It's a really different type of city because the LA basin is huge. It's a really big marketplace.
It's when I looked at it one day, I was just so burnt from driving all over the place. And I was like, okay, my factory's here, my friend's over here, my work is over here. In a day, I could do like 200 miles or something. And I did a quick overlay of just the general areas that I drive around in the LA like area. And
Mhm.
it basically was like, it spans over like half of Massachusetts.
Right.
So like if anyone knows the Mass area, it would be like from driving from Boston to Worcester casually, like just maybe once a day. This is like a normal thing. That's how far away your friends live. And that's
Sure.
just kind of a typical layout of it. I spent a lot of time in my car, and that's just something it's not for me. A lot of people love it. People hate snow. People don't like public transportation, would prefer to be in cars and whatnot. I'm not that person. Yep.
You know,
It's either, and I feel like everyone's kind of torn. You either love New York and you hate LA, or you love LA and you hate New York, and there's like no middle ground.
yeah, the thing I didn't ever like about being in Los Angeles is the just amount of time in your vehicles. You know,
Yeah.
they don't really have mass transit there on the scale that you have on the East Coast.
Yeah.
So, you can run all over the place on the East Coast, mass transit, and it's no big deal. But in LA, to
Yeah.
get anywhere, you can spend 2-3 hours in your car and not go that far.
Yeah. Especially if you're trying to get all the way out to Calabasas too.
Yeah, crazy. So you took the jump and you made the decision. Did you have in mind, specifically what you wanted to start at that time?
Yeah, so that was my whole goal, was while working for others to figure out what category I specifically wanted to go into. And the reason
Mm-hmm.
that it was so difficult to pick was there were categories I liked just personally. Oh, I like designing jackets. I like denim. I like shoes. But at the end of the day, every time I think about it in a more business analytical way, is there a jacket out there that I can't find And the answer is kind of no.
No.
Is there a pair of shoes out there that I can't find? No, like so much is out there. However, while working in Los Angeles, I I was doing production domestically and internationally, and I'd be in hot warehouses and in production facilities, and I'd be lugging around fabric rolls and boxes and bags of denim and whatnot. And at that time, for undergarments, it would be like a padded Victoria's Secret, like just contraption of a piece. And I'd realize like I'm sweating, I'm gross, everything's uncomfortable. I feel like I can't pick anything up without like readjusting straps or whatnot. And it got to the point where I started just wearing sports bras. And it's one of those things where it's not, no one sees it, but in the morning, if I know I put on a sports bra, I just don't feel as confident. If I go get drinks with friends after work, it doesn't give me that like, oh, I feel good about myself first thing in the morning. It's just,
Mm-hmm.
I always kind of like, oh, I'm wearing a sports bra again. And it's just because I physically just didn't feel comfortable wearing anything else. So I started asking a lot of my friends, like, do you know any brand that is kind of no wire, more comfortable, but actually looks kind of decent? Some people would be like I've tried stuff here, tried stuff there, nothing's like my favorite. And then I go into other friends and they just flat out laugh and be like, girl, I can't even find my size, period, in any style, shape, or form. If I find it, I buy three because I don't know the next time I'll be able to find my size.
Right, right.
And so I'm realizing that I have this issue, and it turns out it's a bigger issue if you're in not a typical size range. And I just was like, this is wild. Like, this is kind of really crazy. And the more and more I looked into it, I know construction, I know how to produce things, I know how to source fabrics. So I started to kind of dig into it and learn. And I realized not a lot of brands. Some brands will have a large size range, but they'll still be underwire. Maybe they'll have a large size range, but it comes in black and nude. Or they say they have a large size range, but then once you get into a bralette non-wire type of shape, it's still back to small, medium, large. And then it just stops. And I kept seeing this over and over and over again. Or maybe there will be a nicer one, but it's so cheap that the hardware tarnishes, everything turns green, and it's not withstanding what a bra needs to withstand. So I just kind of rolled with it, and I knew I really wanted to do kind of more direct to consumer and like
Sure.
not start with wholesalers.
Yeah.
So for me, I was like, well, if I did an outerwear jacket, how much is that going to be to ship? So every little element within like the business world, it felt like lingerie was making more and more sense. They're lightweight, my packaging can be smaller. Just I could make it more custom.
Mm-hmm.
Women love it if they find the shape that they want. And I just realized it's something I can't find and I haven't been happy with. So yeah, that was kind of how I ended up landing on lingerie.
Okay. So where do you okay, a couple questions come to mind. Not so much me and the man side of things, but from a business perspective, is it hard to maintain in fact that you're going mostly direct, okay? Is it harder to maintain as many size variations that you have to meet the gap in the market you're trying to fill?
Yes, it's very hard. Basically, I had developed every single size. So I actually like drew out every pattern. And because I was, I am doing it direct to market, um, grew very slow at the beginning.
Right.
So I had the time to sit down and make it. So if I got an order, I would just make it. So instead of placing bulk orders from day one, I kind of was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know if a medium is going to sell more than a small. I
Sure.
don't know if a 38 CD is going to sell as well as a 40 FG. I
Yeah.
quite literally don't have the data for it.
Mm-hmm.
So I literally hustled with the minimal amount of money that I had. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to save costs and I'm just going to sit and I'm going to sew. And so for the first, I mean, more like year, I basically was hand sewing everything.
Wow.
And I would just make it to order. And then that way I would not have over inventory in various sizes. And
Sure.
I now have the data, and it's so interesting compared to some sizes. It's like 15 times more sales than other sizes. So now I
Mm-hmm.
know with like a very confident purchase order going to a manufacturer as to what the volume for every size is going to be.
Right.
But yeah, so that's kind of how I started to try to limit any overstock and over inventory and really try to understand what inventory I would need and how to approach the massive size range.
Well, you probably don't experience the ebbs and flows of trendy things as much as undergarments, right?
And that is also a great reason why I actually wanted to do lingerie. I am not doing seasons
Okay.
because there are no seasons, right? So a lot of the styles are kind of core styles. They're here and they're not going anywhere. And I really like that because I also it's seasonless, so I'm not putting it on sale.
Okay.
I'm not trying to push out old inventory.
Yeah.
So my whole kind of approach to it is no, we just always have this. So if we always
Sure.
have it, you're not going to get a sale. And I don't want to get stuck in this sale loop where customers will be like, oh my gosh, like they have a sale every 3 months. So I'm just never going to buy it like full price because they know it's going to go on sale.
Right. So they're waiting
Yeah.
for the clearance, and that
Yep.
doesn't have to happen.
Nope.
Well, that's cool. So, I have a couple extended friends, and they weren't at the Javits Center. A couple extended friends, and they would just tell me horror stories in that industry of something happens in a trend, and they thought they were riding high. Instantly, that went out of fashion, and now they've got a warehouse sitting with 60,000 units in it,
Oh yeah.
and they don't know
Yep.
what to do with it. I mean, it's just
Yep.
literally like it's like fire sale, and they can't even unload it to a Ross or somebody like that because it's too high end. You have a pair of
Yep.
jeans that was
You'll-
designed that's $250 a pair, and you
Mhm.
can't. I mean, it's fire sale. Just you can't even get your cloth fabric cost back by dumping it to Ross or somebody like that.
Yep. And on top of that, you'll dilute the brand and
Yeah.
you'll start being associated with a TJ Maxx or a Ross or whatnot. And that's how brands die, essentially.
Yeah.
If you start seeing them there, that means they're doing something wrong.
Yeah, and the conversations I have then, because we were doing some business consulting and proposing some stuff, I didn't realize the volatility of it. And they're like, "Oh no, you have one thing that happens in the marketplace where some celebrity or somebody that's interesting or an influencer, I
Mhm.
guess would be called today, picks it up and does something with it. Something can run wild, but it might only run 3-4 months, you know?
Mhm.
And by the
Yep.
time they get their systems turned to manufacture it to meet the demand,
It's already
it's already
gone.
gone.
Like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So very sage of you to make a decision to go to lingerie undergarments because, like you said, they're going to be there. They're going to be there. It's
Yep.
not something people are going away with. Okay.
Yep.
So how many SKUs do you have today? I mean, how many product items do you have?
Oh gosh. It's fluctuating a bit.
Okay.
Style wise, if we talk just like complete sets, there's at least 10 or 12. I have another 5 coming in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
And then there's also sleepwear and a couple lifestyle items like candles and sleep masks. And I'm obsessed with stationery, just like it's a weird like thing that I'm just weird. So I made T-Top pens just because I was like, I just really want a pen that says T-Top on it. So I was like, great. I'm just going to start selling these now too.
Okay.
So they're kind of part of that lifestyle bucket. Yeah, and then I'll actually do, because I do hand sew a lot, or if I, so about that kind of, there is a lot of waste in the fashion industry. So kind of on the topic of all those garments, what are you going to do with it? Not only garments, but there's also a lot of overstock fabric with the same idea. They were like, yeah, everything's going to be pink. And then all of a sudden they're like, wow, pink is not selling. So then they won't even produce anything, so they'll just be sitting on pink fabric or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been lucky enough to be able to kind of purchase some dead stock materials from other brands to kind of try to be as sustainable as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I just recently got a really big donation from another Boston local brand, so I'm making some small short batches that are just, this is it, there's maybe like 50 pieces. Once it's sold out, it's out. And I'll do custom orders as well. So if someone has a very specific, oh, I really need the side to be higher, I need this in the cup, I need whatever it is, I can do that adjustment. Or some people, they're just like, I just want something that no one else has.
Hmm.
So my one requirement is that they have to have purchased a bra previously so that they can confirm that it fits how they want to.
Sure.
And then I'll keep the same form, and based on their taste and like what they like and what they don't like, they'll give me a quick little bullet point, and I'll whip up a whole kind of set based on what they want. And that's actually been doing a lot better than I ever anticipated. I kind of threw it up during COVID because everything kind of stopped, and I was trying to brainstorm something a little bit more customizable and fun and something more approachable and something that would kind of spark a little bit of joy with people. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been doing really well. And I do like a monthly custom undie delivery too. So you can pick like 6 months, and every month I'll send you a brand new one of a kind pair of underwear that you are the only person that has this pair.
Interesting.
And that's actually been like, that has been doing so much better than I ever anticipated.
Wow, sort of the underwear subscription plan, huh?
Yeah, but very kind of like a little bit more luxe and
Sure.
custom, because I don't know any other brand for any other garments really where you can just be like, send me something that no one else in the world has.
No, you're not going to find that. So
Mm-hmm.
you're like the custom home builder then. You're
Yeah.
designing that. So where, from a price point positioning, do you have a particular strategy on how you're trying to price strategize your
Yes.
stuff?
I've raised my prices twice.
Okay.
I would definitely say I'm in the pricier. I'm not like the top like Italian luxury price point, but I would say I'm in a designer price point.
Price point. Okay.
Yeah. Because a lot of times I'll get comments like, what? Like, that's crazy. And then I'll be like, I hand sew it. Like, that's what you get.
Wow.
But yeah, so like a set could be like a bra and underwear can be up to like $150.
Okay.
A bra hovers around the $80-$100 point. And then underwear is within the $30 to $50 price point too. So definitely not a target price
No.
point.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's been the most challenging aspect of you launching this business?
So going into it, I was like, I know how to build a website. This is going to be easy. I know how to make a bra. This is great. I know how to make a perfect product. I know there's a market. And I kind of, when I launched, nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
And very quickly, I realized I somehow in my brain completely overlooked marketing and customer acquisition.
Sure.
And really understanding what is it that I need to do to get people to the website.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, since starting, that has been my number one goal and my only source of kind of me focusing on. And just a lot of trial and error of trying PR or advertising or collaborations with local boutiques or whatever it is, to see what works and what's kind of bringing in growth.
Okay.
And that has been a huge learning curve. That's something I'm still kind of learning every single day.
Well, I've been in tech and been around a lot of startups and entrepreneur environments, and it generally is one of the biggest challenges is people overestimate that they can find their market faster than they can.
Yeah. And I know it's there, and I have a low return rate, high or return as in like returning the product, but then I have a high returning customer purchasing rate.
Right.
So I have everything is looking good, and everything has been growing. It's just so much slower than I anticipated. So it's really kind of, I'm profitable. Like everything is in that positive light. It's just figuring out how to bring the cost for acquisition down. That's really, really where I am now.
What's your long-term goal? Are you trying to stay a boutique, or do you want to get big enough that you can, start to make some decent money out? I'm not saying you're not making decent money now, but what I'm saying, to scale it a little bit more.
It's definitely to scale it.
Okay.
110%. I'd like to move within the next year to New York City.
Okay.
I think that's where I need to be, just even for finding employees, even finding interns. That's where the workforce is for my industry specifically.
For your industry, well, and you're probably interested in paying like 50 to 70% more in rent, right?
Well, considering I don't pay rent currently, it kind of doesn't matter where I'm going to move to. And Boston, I'm sorry. Boston is not cheap. So
no,
if I'm going to move to Boston and New York, it's kind of,
well, it makes sense.
And actually rent, I was doing some analysis this last week, just to see where price points are. And let me tell you, it is insane. It's so low compared to like looking a year ago pre-COVID. So I'm kind of thinking it might be a really, really good move to capitalize on the lower rents, and it's both offices and living. And so I want to be there. And also I used to do pop-ups pre-COVID there. Things seem to be starting up again. The majority of my orders are coming from New York, New York, one of the 5 boroughs. It's number 1 is San Francisco, then it's New York, and then it kind of splits between Miami, LA, and Chicago.
Wow.
And so if majority of my customers are in New York, it makes a lot more sense. And I do feel like it has a New York vibe. I've asked a lot of customers, like, where do you think we're located? And I get New York a lot. So it makes a lot more sense. So I definitely want to grow it to a very legit point. I am bootstrapped, so it is going to take a minute, and I'm okay with that. If it takes 20 years, that's fine. But yes, the whole purpose is to build it to a substantial business.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what part of the whole thing do you enjoy the most? Is it the designing?
I don't design. So that's another beautiful part. Actually, no, I always say like the first thing I'll like get design off my hands. For how like creative and like you think like all I want to do is design, I never want to design. But the great thing with lingerie is I have my one pattern. I swap out elastic colors. I swap out fabric colors, fabric materials, and essentially every style on my site looks completely different, but they're all the same pattern. So a lot of it is just kind of playing with colors and whatnot. And it's not, as long as it goes within the vibe of the company, I go with it. And I never design, quite literally. What I do a lot of that I would say is equally as creative that isn't design is the brand aspect of it. When people think of Titov, what do they think of? Kind of like you think of Ralph Lauren, you think all American, then you think of Marc Jacobs and it's a little bit more cutesy and kind of out there. You think of Tory Burch and it's very prim and proper. There's always this kind of like characteristic and or like even a character that you think of when you think of a brand. So for me, it's trying to align that and make sure that my brand, from packaging, from the website, from my newsletters, to the apparel, to the way, the tone of voice that I present the company in, all of the social medias. My favorite thing is constantly kind of focusing in and making sure that everything's aligned, that when someone thinks of a Titov party, that everyone thinks the same thing, that everyone kind of has the same image of who the Titov girl is, what a Titov store would look like, what they expect when they order something. Like I'm right now kind of in the process of making sure everything's really aligned with that. And I'm really, really in love with doing that, because I feel like it's just as creative of a process.
Okay, cool. So looking back, what would you do different? I mean, how long have you had Titov now?
Approaching 2 years.
Okay, 2 years.
Like officially from like starting to launch. What I would do different, I mean, going into it, because I don't have a business school background, I was actually really seriously considering business school, but everyone was like, just put that money into a business and just like figure it out on your way. So I've kind of always approached it that if I made a mistake and lost money, then I basically paid for my class. So I'm like trying to rethink it in my brain. I regret doing PR out of everything. It didn't work for me. A lot of people I later would talk to, everyone was like, oh gosh, like, yeah, no, like don't do it. I think some agencies do a great job from what I can hear, but it's hard to work with them because if they're really good, like they don't have the bandwidth to take on every brand. I didn't lose too much money, but I've heard horror stories of people getting into like 6-month contracts, 10 grand a month type situations, which they'd be like VC backed and whatnot, so they'd have the capital for it, but still like that really hurts my core. Like that's like not okay. And I just felt like it did not work for me, and I heard a lot of kind of not great things. And what I wish, I have the experience, it's fine. I wish I did more research prior to going into it and had asked all these questions to people, not afterwards, but before I even kind of went into it. Yeah, that I would say that's kind of, I guess anything where I didn't put my like time to research and do my due diligence before, that's what I regret.
I have some friends that made some of the similar mistakes, and they always referred to PR as you have to be pretty rich, pretty rich. Because,
I feel like I've heard that.
Yeah, you know, the challenge of it is that whenever we're launching a company, we have great ideas and you just think, oh, everybody's going to jump on this, or I don't care if it's a company, a website, a podcast, whatever. People are like, well, if I build it, they're going to come. Well, that's just not the case.
And that's just not, Yeah,
you got to pull the people into your marketplace. You've got to start the conversation. And, you know, PR companies, I believe that PR companies are probably mostly only effective in really larger brands and things, or when you have a large set of customers. Because when you're starting a company, you need cash, you need sales, you know?
Yep.
And you're just not going to get that from PR.
I also think you can if you're placed properly. And I think for me, what I pay for if I hire a PR person, or like how I have it in my head, is your relationships.
Yeah.
Because those are the relationships I don't have. So I assume and are on good terms with journalists at various publications.
Yeah.
And that is not the case. And a lot of what I've kind of heard and seen is they're pitching as like with the same, if I were to just pitch. And that's the thing that kind of what I've realized between a good PR person and kind of a PR person that's just kind of doing PR.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying that they aren't putting in the work, but if you don't have those relationships, it's not going to go anywhere, because the relationships are going to kick you out basically. And that's what I realized. And I was like, oh wait, like you're just pitching people, like what like you don't have friends, like I'm paying you to have friends basically.
And you don't.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, fantastic. What a great story. Where do you see yourself in a year from now? Do you have some envisions of that for a year from now?
Yeah, I see myself in New York.
Okay.
Hopefully on track to actually having a full-time employee by the summer.
Okay.
So that would be really, really great. And being able to pay myself as well would be kind of why I would be moving to New York.
Sure.
That would lead to that. Yeah, and I want to be at a point where right now everything's really, 1 month is great, 1 month isn't so great, and I'd like to be at a point where I figure out what's working so that I can at least be stable. Sure. And have a better idea of predicting.
Yeah.
Even if it's 3 months out, I'd just like to know. And I realized that my real sales really didn't start until last summer. So like this upcoming April, I have no previous April to compare it to.
Yeah, you don't have year over year numbers to compare.
No, because everything was so like random and there was no rhyme or reason. Where in July, that's when I started to kind of implement a few things, and everything's been kind of growing faster and more consistently. So now it's like, I'm excited to get to like the fall, because then I'll be able to start seeing, oh, is it every October is great and
Right.
every March is awful? Like, is that just something I need to accept and like work around? And I'd love to be at a point where I'm able to kind of start understanding the cycles and all of that.
Well, that'll take some time, but just keep in mind they're rarely any overnight successes. They often take a decade.
Well, that's what I say. Like, if it takes 20 years, that's okay with me.
Yeah, that's great. So give out your website again and make sure you spell it so that way people know where to come and take a look at what you're doing.
Yes, it is Titov Label. Titov is spelled Titov.
Okay, Titov Label. Okay, fantastic. Okay, so you've been very generous with your time, and if you've listened to a few episodes, you probably know what's coming next. We all have this thing called a bucket list out there. And if you haven't heard this, I wear this out, but you've shared a lot about you. So there's always an opposite of everything in the world. So it's the opposite list it rhymes with bucket and starts with an F, and I won't say that. What might be something on a F-it list for you that you're just not going to do, that Masha's just not going to do?
There were a lot of things, and then I ended up doing them, and I was like, man, I was wrong. Like, I guess I was glad to do it. So the PR thing, I will not go down that path again. And also working with wholesalers, I'm getting to the point where I'm realizing I have to stand my ground with things. So I'm no longer yes man when it comes to, I feel like I was really desperate at the beginning because I was like, I just need sales, like anything literally, where now I'm at a point where I really want to keep the brand integrity. So saying no to opportunities that come about for sure.
Sure. Well, fantastic. It's been great to get to know you. We'll have you back because I want to hear how the progress of the story goes. I think you're onto something very interesting there because, that is a type of garment that I hear lots of women complaining about. That there just isn't one that is the right. And if they're a discerning buyer, they don't want something that's just off the rack somewhere that everybody else has and stuff. So very interesting. And I find it very refreshing that you jumped in and just started sewing. I mean, that's pretty cool.
That's the hustle from my parents for sure.
That's right. Yeah, you just get in and you make your own dog food. That's great. Well, thanks for coming on today. We have enjoyed getting to learn about you more, and we will definitely get you back on to tell updated versions of this as you continue to go. Yeah, I always find it refreshing when I find young people like yourself. And again, young is perspective. I'm 55, so I have kids that are 18 to 26. So um, I'm not saying you're that young, but I'm just saying I always find it refreshing when some people are out there chasing dreams, doing things that might seem impossible, and then just learning through the process. I think it's a great, because not everybody wants to do that.
Hmm.
So
I appreciate that.
Well, thanks for coming on. And so, folks, we'll call that another edition of the Rex Andrews Show. Don't forget to stop by the website, because you'll be able to get her links there, more information, and of course, information on everyone that we have on the show, plus some interesting things we're doing. So until next time, I always have to say it's pretty easy. Be safe, be bold, and make it a great day.